Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us for the October Farm to Early Care and Education webinar from the National Farm to School Network. Today, we are going to be digging into local procurement and purchasing and utilizing local foods in early care and education settings. My name is Lacey Stevens, and I'm the Farm to Early Care and Education Associate with the National Farm to School Network, and I'll be hosting you today. So a few housekeeping reminders before we get started. This webinar will be recorded and will be available on the National Farm to School Network resource database in just a few days. And as your attendees, you'll also receive a link to access that recording once it's available. All attendees are in listen-only mode. So as you do have questions or questions come up for you, please feel free to enter those in the question box on your control panel. And we should have plenty of time for our panelists to answer questions at the end of the session. So as you can see from today's lineup here, we have a great panel of experts in early care and education and local procurement. So today we'll be hearing from perspectives from the National Farm to School Network, the U.S. Department of Agriculture, Michigan State University Center for Regional Food Systems, and Baxter Child Development Center. Before we get started, I would like to provide a brief introduction to the National Farm to School Network. So the National Farm to School Network is the leading voice around farm to school and farm to early care and education across the United States. We utilize this network structure that you can see here in this image of regional leads, state leads, and what is now over 15,000 network members to support and create opportunities to bring local food sourcing and food and agriculture education into schools and early care and education settings in communities across the country. So we provide this voice and leadership for the movement by acting as a hub for information, networking, and advocacy. And this webinar is just one example of how we connect people to resources or share information to stakeholders across the country. And we're really able to capitalize on that extensive network model that I just mentioned to have the opportunity to identify the best resources, models, and approaches in farm to school and farm to early care and education, and really share that information widely through our networks. Networking, or connecting people to people, is also a vital piece of the work that we're doing. At the national level, we convene national farm to early care and education work groups. We also support our partners at the state and local level to develop their own state and local networks to help expand and institutionalize the farm to early care and education movement. And finally, we work to connect people to advocacy or policy by providing information, opportunities, and capacity building for involvement in advocacy at the national, state, and local levels. So one of the most important ways that we build the movement for farm to school and farm to early care and education is by celebrating National Farm to School Month. So this month happens to be National Farm to School Month. We really couldn't have planned this webinar at a better time. It's not only National Farm to School Month, but this week we happen to be celebrating Healthy School Meals Week, a perfect fit for our focus on procurement today. And it is certainly not too late for you to get involved in celebrating National Farm to School Month with us. So our theme this year is One Small Step, and we're asking anyone and everyone to sign our pledge to make one small step for farm to school and farm to early care and education. And just by being on this webinar, you've already taken that step. So by entering, you can go to farmtoschool.org/one-small-step and provide your information in that pledge, and you'll be entered to win a sweepstakes for farm to school support for a qualifying school or early care and education setting of your choice. So please visit our website and find ways to celebrate National Farm to School Month with us. So now moving right into the content of our today's presentation. Our objectives today are to really understand local procurement as a core component of farm to early care and education, to better understand regulations around local purchasing and equip you with the knowledge and resources to take those first steps or the next steps in local purchasing and procurement. So let's talk a little bit about our presenters. As I said, my name is Lacey Stevens, and I'm the Farm to Early Care and Education Associate with the National Farm to School Network. In my position with the National Farm to School Network, I work to promote and expand farm to early care and education across the country through information sharing, network building, and advocacy. I'm currently based in Bozeman, Montana, and I'm a registered dietitian with a master's degree in sustainable food systems from Montana State University. Next, we'll hear from Jenny Farinas, who is a program specialist at the USDA Food and Nutrition Service in the Midwest Regional Office, where she currently works with the Child and Adult Care Food Program and the Summer Food Program. An exciting part of her job includes promoting local foods in childcare and summer meals. After Jenny, we'll hear from Abby Harper, who is the Farm to School Specialist at the MSU Center for Regional Food Systems. She works to provide support, technical assistance, and network development for early childhood programs and K-12 schools throughout Michigan and nationally, and focus in increasing the amount of local foods they purchase and serve in child meal programs. And then finally, we'll hear from Becky Quastiniette. Becky is the Food Program Manager at the Baxter Child Development Center. She's been in the culinary field for over 10 years and has a culinary management degree from Sequia Culinary Institute. Along with Becky, we'll hear from Star Morgan, who is the director of Baxter Child Development Center. Star has been working on her dissertation for a PhD in child development and has been working with young children for 18 years. Star has a passion for providing opportunities for children to learn healthy eating habits right from the start. So to set the stage for all of these wonderful presenters, I'd like to provide a brief overview of farm to early care and education and why it's such a valuable approach for children and their families. So when we talk about farm to early care and education, we're really talking about this broad range of strategies and activities, including increasing access to healthy local foods, but also including gardening opportunities and food-based activities. So we don't have one prescribed farm to ECE program, but each individual initiative is going to look somewhat different based on the interest, capacity, and resources available to individual centers, programs, or homes. And in this process, we're looking at targeting children and their families in multiple ECE settings. So we can adapt farm to early care and education activities to family child care homes, to Head Starts, early Head Starts, child care centers, preschools, programs in K-12 districts. So any of these wide variety of early care and education settings where children ages 0 to 5 are being served, and we can connect with those children and their families. So while every farm to early care and education initiative looks somewhat different, most include one or more of these core elements. So we have the school gardening piece. We have the food-based education. So that might be related to nutrition, to agriculture, to any food-based activities. And then we have the procurement piece. So getting those local foods into the early care and education settings. And although a program may start with one of these activities, it's a great opportunity to build these pieces together as they really work in connection and conjunction to create the most benefit for children, families, and communities. So if a child has the opportunity to grow broccoli in their own garden and see how it grows, or they have the opportunity to meet the farmer who's growing and bringing the broccoli into their school, they're going to be a lot more likely to try that broccoli once they get to sit down to the lunch table. So it's important to think about how these educational and gardening pieces not only offer a lot of their own benefits, but also big contributors to the success of the procurement piece of the work. So why is farm to school and farm to early care and education so important for our children and communities? So farm to school for any age, from our littlest ones on up, provide what we like to call that triple win. So kids are winning with those lifelong healthier habits, improved academic performance, engagement in classrooms, and connecting with their food and communities. Farmers are winning with increased and diversified market opportunities and increased incomes, and communities are winning with increase in local economic activity and increased impacts on household food security within communities. And then when we talk about reaching these early care and education settings and providing these little ones with these incredible opportunities, we have some additional specific benefits that really align with the goals of the early care and education community. So we have opportunities for increased family engagement, providing meaningful engagement opportunities for the whole family and children of multiple ages, and also influencing food choices and access at home. In addition to that, food-based activities are an incredible opportunity for hands-on experiential learning. We know that these little ones learn the best by engaging and utilizing all of their senses. And we have the opportunity to meet numerous early learning and program standards, as well as support appropriate cognitive, physical, emotional, and social development at the same time with farm to early care and education activities. And then there's, of course, that priority of health and wellness. We know that young children are developing those taste preferences and habits that can set them up for a lifetime of health. And we can see growing evidence that these farm to early care and education activities are positively influencing their acceptance of healthy foods. And we also have the opportunity to create an environment where those healthy choices are the norm and the priority. So it's clear that with farm to early care and education, we can provide providers with the chance to meet and achieve these priority areas with all those additional benefits we discussed of families, farmers, and communities. So now let's take a closer look at the local food piece that we'll be discussing more in depth today, which includes integrating local foods into meals, snacks, taste tests, or classroom activities. So the early care and education setting offers some really unique opportunities for local food integration. With early care and education settings, we have a huge diversity of class sizes and program sizes. So that creates opportunity to connect with farmers of varying sizes as well. So we might have a small farmer who doesn't have the volume to provide for a huge center or a large school district, but they might be a good match for a smaller early care and education program or a family child care home to provide food. Many ECE programs are also based in year-round programming, so they can take advantage of that seasonality that some K-12 districts might miss out on. And even the approach to food and mealtime that we see in early care and education settings supports success for local food. So food-based activities provide that experiential learning opportunity that we mentioned is so important. And the family-style meals create a lot of opportunity for teachers to sit down, talk about where this food is coming from, and create that mealtime as a learning opportunity. We'll hear from Jenny from USDA momentarily about how local foods are also integrated as a best practice in CACFP. And finally, in a lot of situations and communities, we can capitalize on the successes and sometimes even the infrastructure and framework that K-12 farm-to-school programs have created to help integrate local foods and procurement pieces into the early care and education settings. So I do want to share with you a couple of resources available from the National Farm-to-School Network to help you get started and revisit some of the tips for success that we'll hear from our presenters today. So available in your panel and also available on our website at farmtoschool.org, we have some great getting started fact sheets. So getting started with farm to early care and education, as well as local purchasing for family child care homes and local procurement for child care centers. So many of the highlights that we hear today will be emphasized in these handouts, and I encourage you to take those as a reference and resource as you move forward with your work in expanding local purchasing. I also encourage you to visit our resource database at www.farmtoschool.org/resources. Not only will this webinar be archived there in the future, we have previous early care and education webinars archived there. We've got a plethora of curricula, resources around gardening, resources around local purchasing, as well as even resources around building state-level networks. So no matter what stage you're in or what your role is in farm to early care and education, we have a lot of valuable resources to help you expand your work. So with that, I would like to take this opportunity to turn it over to Jenny to discuss USDA local procurement and CACFP.
Great, thank you, Lacey. Hello, everyone. As Lacey said, my name is Jenny Farinas, and I work for the USDA Food and Nutrition Service in the Midwest Regional Office in Chicago. And so I work specifically in the Child and Adult Care Food Program in the Summer Food Service Program, but I also have the fun job of helping promote farm to preschool, as well as local foods in our Summer Meals Program. So just a note for you, so farm to preschool, what we call that in USDA, and farm to early care and education are interchangeable terms. So with that, I'm very excited to have this opportunity to speak with you all today and share a little bit about USDA and farm to preschool. So for those of you on the line who may not be familiar with the Child and Adult Care Food Program, or we call it CACFP at USDA, I will give you a brief overview. And we'll also look at why farm to preschool is a priority for USDA. And I'm going to also help you debunk some of those myths about local procurement in CACFP. I'm also going to share some great USDA resources that we have for farm to preschool. So let's go and head and get started. All right, so through CACFP, there are more than 3.3 million children and 120,000 adults who receive nutritious meals and snacks each day. And this includes emergency shelters, adult daycare centers, at-risk after-school programs, outside school hour programs, childcare centers, and family daycare homes. And so today I will be talking about the childcare centers and family daycare homes. So in USDA efforts to promote local procurement in CACFP, USDA is currently focusing on those early childcare settings. So we're all working together to feed our children. So just to get you a better idea of how CACFP works, CACFP is a federally funded program, and it's administered by our state agencies. And in many of our states, this is the Department of Education. So in order to receive reimbursement for meals and snacks that are served, our sponsoring organizations, child care centers, and family daycare homes must provide meals and snacks that meet the program meal patterns that are set by the USDA. So now let's dig into some fun stuff. So why is farm to preschool a priority of USDA? So the Healthy Hunger-Free Kids Act of 2010 requires that USDA bring the CACFP meal patterns in line with the latest dietary guidelines for Americans. However, the reasons for implementing updated standards go far beyond fulfilling this mandate, and it goes along with what Lacey was mentioning earlier. Research has shown that taste preferences really do help with those eating habits, and they're formed early in a child's life. And so it shows that CACFP is a critical part of establishing those healthy habits. And I just wanted to share this, like our USDA Office of Community Food Systems, formerly known as the Farm to School program, really does have a dream that one day that every child, everywhere, and in every child nutrition program has daily access to local, regional, and delicious food. So you may be wondering about CACFP reimbursement and local procurement. So CACFP reimbursement can be used to purchase local foods and also provide hands-on food-related activities and education. And that can be seen here in this photo of our USDA Undersecretary Kevin Concanon, who visited a preschool in Seattle where the kids were participating in hands-on activities about local foods. And this preschool also does garden-based activities. And when a colleague visited the site, she overheard a child ask, "May I have more kale chips, please?" So this and many examples across the country really do show that farm to preschool activities are making an impact. Another very important benefit of farm to preschool is that connecting farmers to CACFP can have tremendous economic benefits. With daily opportunities to serve local products through the CACFP, farm to preschool provides a new market for local and regional farmers, as well as ranchers, fishermen, food processors, manufacturers, and distributors. Here we have a photo of a field trip that was taken to a Hmong American Farmer Association farm in Minnesota. So in addition to taking field trips to this farm, this child care center also purchases produce from this local farm. Now that brings us to why you've signed up for this webinar. So let's dig in and talk about buying local in CACFP. So options for local purchasing isn't just about purchasing fresh fruits and veggies, but that's really a good place to start. As many of you know, local foods can span the entire plate, including dairy products, eggs, flour, beans, meat, and so much more. So since CACFP is a federal program, I think it's very important to mention what's allowable under federal regulations. So there is no federal definition that local is a specific distance between the farmer food and the consumer. So you can decide how you want to define local, and there are many ways to define local. So local can be within a certain radius, such as within 25 miles, or it can mean within the county, state, or your region. So you can also modify the definition of local depending on what season it is. So as you see, there's great flexibility in defining local. All right, so we encourage you really to consider the many sources for local foods, as there really is no one right way. And no, Abby Harper will go into more detail about the different ways to buy local, but I just wanted to share some examples. So you can purchase or source locally, either directly from a farm or through your vendor. You can also source locally through a food hub, like our presenters from the Baxter Child Development Center. You can also purchase from your farmer's market or a community-supported agriculture program, otherwise known as a CSA, or even from your own garden, using your own garden produce. You might be wondering, how do I incorporate this into my menu? And there's several ways to integrate your these local items. A good first step is to check what is already local on your menu. And this can be as simple as looking at the cases that the food comes in, or having an in-depth conversation with your food distributors. Another way to pull in local item is to commit to a Harvest of the Month program and offer a locally sourced item once a week or once a month. An easy option I've seen is substituting ingredients you're currently purchasing with a local version when it's available. Some of the more advanced farm-to-school programs have actually been developing recipes based on what's seasonal in their area. Also, with the holidays coming up, this is a fun way to incorporate local items, is perhaps having a harvest-themed event, maybe around Thanksgiving. And these events can also be a great way to fundraise and engage parents. Talking about menu planning, I just wanted to share this this menu from South Carolina that shows how you can make those substitutions. So this is a great example of that by using local items. All right, continuing with menu planning, for many of you who participate in CACFP, you do know that there's a new meal pattern. And this is the first major revision of the CACFP meal pattern since the program began in 1968. So yeah, it's really long overdue. So with the new CACFP meal pattern rule, farm to preschool efforts can be really very important in increasing a child's willingness to try new foods. And these new meal patterns introduce nutritious foods early on so that children become accustomed to the fruits, veggies, whole grains, and other healthy foods that will be served in the National School Lunch Program. So the CACFP meal pattern rule includes best practices that highlight areas where centers and daycare homes can take additional steps to further improve the nutritional quality of the meal served. And this can include incorporating seasonal and locally produced foods into meals. And so just going back to why there is a new meal pattern, I wanted to share this chart with you. So here we have the Dietary Guidelines for Americans found that while the majority of young children meet the recommended intake for fruits, unfortunately, very few children consume the recommended amount of vegetables. As you see on the chart here, the blue lines represent the range of recommended intake for vegetables and fruits, and the orange dots indicate the current intake of vegetables and fruits. So as you can see, on average, children ages 1 through 8 consume the recommended amount of fruit, but unfortunately, everyone falls short in how many vegetables they eat. So if you happen to have additional questions, which I'm sure most providers might have, or centers, I highly recommend contacting your state agency. So moving on to talking about what are the purchasing requirements and procurement regulations that we have. I just would like to clarify some purchasing requirements here. For institutions and their sponsored child care centers, they're subject to procurement regulations, and this is even when using non-program funds to purchase meals. But on the other hand, family daycare homes do have more flexibilities and are not required by regulation to conduct procurement methods that do uphold free and open competition, but it is still encouraged for family daycare homes. And just a little bit about procurement regulations. So federal procurement regulations really do have a purpose. They help you to get the best quality and price. They leave room for flexibility and innovation, and they ensure that program benefits are received by eligible programs and children. They also do ensure that benefits are used effectively and efficiently. All right, so to help you get a better understanding of what local purchasing and CACFP looks like, I'd like to just help you debunk some local procurement myths that are out there. Oh, it's not popping up here. Okay, sorry about that. So first off, myth or fact, purchasing directly from farmers, farm stands, or farmers markets is not a reimbursable expense through CACFP. So you see, that is a myth. CACFP funds can be used for purchasing local foods from many different sources. However, it is important to document your expenditures. So you might be wondering, what is the proper way to document these purchases? And handwritten receipts are acceptable documentation. So as long as they include date of purchase, name of vendor, farmer, the item cost, amount, and total cost, that's all fine. So it's very simple. It's just like any other store receipt. All right, the next myth or fact, food donated from local gardens or farms can be used as part of the reimbursable meal. Is that a myth or fact? And that is a fact, yes. So while this full CACFP reimbursement must be spent on allowable costs, there is no federal requirement that all food components be purchased with program funds. So just remember, though, that you must maintain records of the types and quantities of the donated food. So yeah, donated foods can be used. All right, this is the last one. CACFP funds can also be used for garden inputs to grow your own food, such as seeds, fertilizer, watering cans, tools, etc. Is that a myth or a fact? That is a fact. So as long as the produce grown in the garden will be used as part of the reimbursable meal or for nutritional education activities, this is fine. So if you do use garden produce for the reimbursable meal, again, just make sure to document the weight and volume of the produce used. All right, now let's take a closer look at a couple purchasing methods. So I'm going to briefly talk about informal procurement, also known as small purchases. I will also share some info about micro purchases. So first off, I'm going to mention informal procurement. So if you are a CACFP institution, informal procurement occurs when purchases fall at or below federal, state, or local small purchase threshold. and the small purchase threshold is $150,000. But your state could have a lower threshold, so make sure to check with them. Anything above this threshold is considered formal procurement and therefore must be publicly announced. So this method is less rigorous than the formal procurement method, but competition must still occur and at least 3 quotes need to be requested. So although it's not publicly advertised like the formal procurement method, it's important to refer to written specifications when contacting vendors for quotes so that there is consistent communication. For informal procurement, the contract is awarded to the lowest bidder that is both responsive and responsible. Again, you do need documentation about how this solicitation was conducted. And moving on to micro-purchasing. So this is a new method of informal procurement that can be used for the purchase of food and non-food items when the aggregate dollar amount does not exceed $3,500. And this threshold of $3,500 was set last October, but it can be adjusted periodically for inflation. So micro-purchases are intended to minimize that burden for very small purchases and can be awarded without soliciting competitive quotations if the price is considered to be reasonable. So however, please be reminded that in order to get a better price, you might consider using another method of procurement. Also, it's necessary to make sure to distribute these types of purchase equitably among qualified suppliers. So with micro-purchasing, it's a great option if you're planning to go to the local farmers market and purchase items that are in season. And some states do encourage sponsors to use these micro-purchasing for specialty items or things that are not considered for daily use. Just some resources to help you to better understand the regulations. We have a CACFP policy memo 11-2015, and this helps to really outline purchasing for local foods and CACFP. And this can be found on our USDA CACFP website. And then moving on to the next great resource is our Procuring Local Foods for Child Nutrition Programs guide. And this can be found on our Farm to School website. And this now includes a section on farm to preschool, and there are also plans to expand this section in 2017. Now moving on, I just want to mention the Farm to School grant. So we're really excited that we announced the release of the FY 2017 Farm to School Grant Program request for applications. And what's very exciting is that funding priorities include projects working to bring local or regional foods into school-based CACFP programs, as well as our school-based summer food service programs. And just to mention, an important date is that applications are due on December 8th. So I highly recommend checking out our Farm to School page for more information about that. And just quickly, I just wanted to share some great USDA resources that we have for farm to preschool. So our Farm to Preschool webpage, I've put the URL there. It has some great resources, including that policy memo and also fact sheets that I'll be talking about here next. Yes, so our Farm to Preschool fact sheet, it's a great introduction to Farm to Preschool for providers and partners with tips on how to get involved. And you can find that on our webpage. Okay. All right, so USDA Team Nutrition, they have some wonderful resources at this, I put the website down here, and these can help you with nutrition or garden-based activities. A very popular resource on that website is the Grow It, Try It, Like It, and it's being currently revised to align with the new meal pattern, and we hope that it'll be available in 2017, so definitely check out Team Nutrition. Also, the USDA Food Buying Guide Calculator is fantastic. If you're going to be purchasing directly from a farmer, this is a handy tool that can help you convert pounds into serving sizes. And this can also be found on the Team Nutrition website. Also, if you're looking for some recipes, USDA has some websites here that if you're interested, highly recommend checking these out. And then lastly, in the area of technical assistance, I encourage you to sign up for our e-newsletter. It's called The Dirt. And it's now inclusive of all of our farm to child nutrition work. And this is a great way to keep up on webinars and resources. So definitely check out this URL. All right, well, thank you very much. If you have any questions, please feel free to contact me. I've put my email here, or I highly recommend getting in touch with your state agency if you're participating in CACFP. Also, just so you know, each of our regional offices has a farm to school lead, as well as a farm to pre-K and summer contact like me. And I work in the Midwest regional office, but you can find contact information on our farm to school page. So thank you again, and I'll answer questions at the end.
Great. Thank you so much, Jenny. I know those procurement pieces can seem very intimidating, so we really appreciate all the resources you've shared with us there. And we will have some time for questions for Jenny at the end of the session. So next, I would like to turn the mouse over to Abby Harper of MSU Center for Regional Food Systems.
Great, thanks so much, Lacey. So as Lacey mentioned, I'm the Farm to School Specialist at the MSU Center for Regional Food Systems here in East Lansing, Michigan. I mentioned that my work is both statewide as well as national. In statewide, I focus on the K through 12 space as well, but nationally, I'm really focused on how to increase local purchasing in early care and education environments. So my work spans both Michigan work and national work, and one of the resources that we've developed in years past is this Farm to Early Childhood Programs Guide, which I just want to highlight. It guides practitioners through the steps of getting more locally sourced food into childhood meal programs. It's a really kind of hands-on practical guides with a lot of tools and worksheets and resources for supporting your process, and I put our website up there. It's freely available there and can just be a really great tool to follow along with as you plan your local purchasing program and plan to increase the amount of food that you purchase locally. So no matter what step you are at the process, if you're just starting or if you are looking to expand what you're purchasing locally, it can provide some helpful guidance at each step in the process. So I want to emphasize, and I know that Jenny touched on this a little bit, as did Lacey, that farm to early care and education can really come in all different shapes and sizes. And I think it's important to note because however you choose to procure your local foods, it may vary substantially based on what your setup and what your program looks like. So across the country, there are programs of all sizes that are engaging in local procurement. So whether you're a large multi-center site or part of a larger school district, whether you're a single center that operates on its own or a smaller family daycare home or unlicensed child care provider, when we talk about local procurement, we're really speaking to all those scales, and local procurement will look very different in all of those scales. So I just want to emphasize that before going further. So if I've been doing some research in the last few months to develop some resources to support local procurement in early care and education, and with that has been talking with a lot of providers all throughout the country on their sort of strategies for increasing local procurement and strategies for working with their current vendors or with new vendors for increasing the amount of local food. So I want to highlight a couple kind of examples from those conversations of what some folks are doing on the ground. For larger centers that are maybe multi-sites or working with a school district, there are a variety of ways that I've seen that folks have done this. Working with a broadline distributor to identify local foods is one really easy strategy for getting local foods in kind of immediately. most broadline distributors are now aware of the demand for local food, and so they have either particular product lines of local foods available or may just have lists of local products. And so having a good relationship with your representative at a broadline distributor can really open up these avenues, and asking about those kinds of what products they have available locally can be a good way to still go through your normal procurement source, but really tailor it towards local food. There have also been some larger centers that work to set up agreements with farmers to supply larger quantities ahead of time. So sometimes farmers may be smaller and may not be used to producing the scale of food needed at a larger site, but many farmers are willing to work with programs that they know are committed to grow crops and volumes specifically for programs. It's something that we call forward contracting. There are a lot of resources from the USDA I know on some of that, but it's essentially working with farmers ahead of time to make sure that they produce the volume that you need for your program. A food hub, which Jenny mentioned earlier, is our regional aggregators and distributors. So they kind of innately have a focus on local, but they may have more flexibility in terms of volume than you might get with a smaller farmer. And so there are a lot of larger centers that see food hubs as kind of their ticket to getting more local food. And then just want to emphasize that one of the difficult parts that I've heard about working with a larger center with multiple sites is that sometimes coordination across kitchens can be somewhat challenging. So programs are using staff training time to talk about menu development and how to best utilize local products so that there are coordinated efforts across kitchens. Next, to talk about some of those more medium-sized centers. That picture on the right is a program in Michigan of a center in Detroit that is working both to purchase from a local farmer that is able to provide large quantities, but they're also doing a lot to grow their own food. So, you know, in this category, we're thinking of some of those medium-sized centers, preschools, Head Start programs. A lot of those have success with purchasing directly from farms or farmers markets if they can get that quantity, and they tend to match up well with farmers that are kind of smaller in size. But there are also a lot of programs at this level, and our panelists after me will be talking about working with food hubs. And in some cases, while food hubs can be a means for getting the quantity for some of those larger centers, often they'll provide quantities that are smaller than what you might be able to get through your typical broadline distributor. So I've talked to a lot of programs that say that working with a food hub has allowed them to really reduce their costs because they're able to order just what they need, versus working through a distributor that might require some larger volumes that then go to waste. And, you know, Jenny mentioned growing your own food as a possibility as well. So a lot of programs may want to procure local food from local farmers, but some programs may actually find that they're able to grow a significant quantity of their food themselves. So I mentioned A&W Daycare, which is in Michigan, which is that photo on the right. And they have a center of about 100 kids, and they're doing a lot of their own growing to kind of complement what they're able to get from local farmers. And they found that it's a pretty cost-effective way to grow their own produce, and then they can really ensure that they can produce enough quantity for their kids through growing their own and include some of those educational components that Lacey mentioned as that three-pronged approach to farm to school. And lastly, I do want to highlight the opportunities in family daycare homes. Family daycare homes, because of their size, may find the easiest time just going direct to sources that are already available. So purchasing through a farmer's market or community-supported agriculture. We've seen some programs in Michigan and are working with some that are creating networks of either family daycare homes or unlicensed childcare providers to create networks to purchase local foods in bulk, which can help to reduce some of the cost burden. So kind of networking with other folks in your area that have family daycare homes and collaborating on local procurement. We also have a lot of folks that have success in just going to their local grocery store that identifies locally grown food and talking with those who work there to really find out what products they have available that are local. And of course, starting a garden is another option at this scale. So I want to spend a little bit of time talking about some of the other strategies that have come out of my conversations with providers on how to really successfully create local procurement programs. The first of which is really focusing on building a team. I think this is one I hear more than anything from everyone, that it's really important to have a team to support your efforts so they can help share the work, they can lead to more sustainable programs, but they can also really expand your access to resources. I've spoken with a lot of programs whose efforts kind of start by reaching out to other people who may be interested in supporting their efforts, and that opens up doors to new sources, new resources, and new ideas. So when thinking about your team members, there are some obvious ones. Food service staff are really critical components of farm to school teams, and in farm to early care and education, teachers end up being really critical as well, as they can facilitate some of that educational components to increase children's receptivity to some of the new foods brought in. And then I also want to highlight that sometimes vendors can be really crucial partners. I mentioned earlier one of the larger sites that has a really good relationship with their broadline distributor representative and actually includes them in the planning of their local food procurement. We have some schools and early childhood programs locally in Michigan that have farmers that are a part of their farm to school team that really allow them to better understand what products are available at what time, and can kind of help them to develop the menu and develop their procurement strategy. And then the last one I really want to focus, apart from some other nonprofits or health centers that may share priorities, is when you're working in some of these smaller centers like a family daycare home, it can be hard to find team members because you're kind of working in isolation. So I think it's all the more there to go outside of your program, look in your community for folks who may support your efforts, whether that's local nonprofits, vendors, your farmer, or other program providers, because I think there are unique teams that can set up that can still serve kind of providing connections to diverse resources and really support you in your programming. So I encourage everyone as they're starting this effort to really focus on who they could include in as part of their efforts. And this is just a picture from one of the farmers that works very closely with a school that has their early childhood programming involved in their farm to school efforts. I think it really highlights the unique opportunities that can come when you have those, when you include those farmers in your team, and some of the kind of reciprocal education that can happen out of it. And then secondly, I really just want to emphasize that everyone should really know their options. Jenny highlighted kind of the spectrum of options before. And so it's just important as you're starting to purchase more local food to really make sure you're aware of what options are around you. All of these are able to be purchased through Child and Adult Care Food Program dollars. And all of them have different kind of benefits to working with them. So when thinking about where you want to be purchasing from, it's important to think about what your goals are for local purchasing, and to choose a vendor or a supplier that meets those goals. So if your goal really is just to increase the amount of local purchasing for the sake of keeping your dollars local, it can be enough to kind of go through your broadline distributor, or go through a food hub that really keeps the process simple and straightforward and in line with what you're currently doing. But if your goal is to have more of that education and connection with farmers directly, then you may want to look at a different source. And often food hubs will kind of provide some of that farmer information as well, though it's still not direct to the source. And I want to highlight one resource in particular from our guide. This is a sample product availability and pricing form from our guide. It's a really useful tool when assessing your local food procurement options and just provides a baseline for approaching farmers with questions about their products and availability, and can really help you determine kind of what the best method for local purchasing out there is. And this is in our guide that I mentioned at the beginning. And then Jenny highlighted the micro-purchase threshold. I think that's one of the most amazing tools that's come out recently that can really facilitate local purchasing. It's a really easy way to just start. It basically allows you to just go and purchase foods under that threshold of $3,500. And one thing that I've heard from everyone is that starting small and just kind of taking that first step, which I think goes along really well with the theme of Farm to School Month this year, which is one small step. But really can be the most essential key to success in just starting. I think sometimes I've seen folks bite off too much in the first year and get overwhelmed, and it ends up kind of setting them backwards. versus starting with a small step. These images are from our Michigan Apple Crunch last year, which is actually going to happen tomorrow, which is how a lot of programs get started with Farm to School. It's one day where they purchase apples and crunch them locally and sort of celebrate Michigan apples and Michigan agriculture. And it's led to folks starting larger efforts and larger conversations with vendors outside of that. And then I also want to emphasize that local procurement can be a really amazing opportunity for building in some of those cultural relevancy pieces for folks that work with diverse communities. Purchasing local can expand your access to a different variety of products and allow you to work more closely with farmers and vendors to get access to products you might not normally have access to. So it can be a really great way to celebrate the cultural diversity of the children that you serve and increase the amount of food that you're able to get that really highlights some of that cultural diversity. It can also be a great way to engage parents in your programming and tie in some of those educational components into your programming as well. And then sort of one of the final best practices that I kind of want to highlight is that a lot of programs have mentioned the effectiveness of their local procurement strategies increases when it's combined with education. Kids are more likely to eat foods that they have some exposure to, either through taste tests, through garden education, or through nutrition education. So incorporating as much of that into your programming can be a really effective tool. Those are some images from a Farm to School taste test of sprouts. Kids got to taste all the sprouts and then choose which salad they wanted based on that. And it was a similar image to what I think Jenny mentioned earlier of kids just asking for seconds of salad, which is something I know we all love to see. And finally, I just want to encourage everyone to plan ahead. I've stressed the importance, I think, throughout all of this that there needs to be a balance of acting now while planning ahead and taking some of those small steps to increase local purchasing in the immediate future while simultaneously looking towards the future of how you can be increasing your purchases and developing some of those stronger relationships with farmers throughout. So I think those small measurable steps each year help make local purchasing feasible while celebrating some successes along the way. But really focusing on the future to think about how you can increase those steps to not only increase your local purchasing, but make it more cost effective and actually develop your menu around what's available seasonally can help to think towards really long-term success and sustainable program changes. And with that, I'll end it. My contact information is up there. Happy to talk with anyone who's interested in learning more, and I will pass it back to Lacey.
Thank you so much, Abby. So many great resources and strategies for success. Next, we'll take a look at some of this work in action with the Baxter Child Development Center. So I will turn the mouse over to Becky so she can tell us more about their work.
Hello. All right, so we are from the Baxter Child Development Center in Grand Rapids, Michigan. And so I'm Becky, and then I have my director Star with us.
There we go. So my name is Star Morgan. I'm the director of Baxter Child Development Center, and as Lacey said, we get to take all the information and tell you how we've put it into action at Baxter. Part of what I've done when I first started at Baxter, and each time I've been hired on as the director of a different child development center, one of the first things that I do is take a look at the food program menu, because what I've noticed is that primarily the menus in early care and education is a lot of what is typically considered kid-friendly foods, chicken nuggets, easy, high-processed meals that kids eat readily. So I wanted to make sure that we're instilling healthy eating habits right from the beginning. I have always had a really strong passion for instilling those early healthy eating habits, so I thought what better way than at the Child Development Center and the food that they're eating there. So at Baxter, I started by just making some easy changes, moving from canned fruit to frozen fruit and vegetables, and I found myself in the position to hire a new food service manager. So I thought that's the perfect opportunity to really make some big changes to our program. So in my search, I wanted to make sure that I wasn't just looking for someone with someone who loves cooking, but I wanted to find someone who really understands healthy cooking and was passionate about instilling early healthy eating habits. So that's when I hired Becky as the food program manager, and I'll let her tell you a little bit more about herself.
Yeah, so I've been here for about 1.5 years and was hired in right about a couple months after I finished culinary school. So I have an associate's in culinary management, and that program just kind of gave me a full view of what a restaurant really does, but all of the principles I learned I could easily apply to here. So I had a lot of contacts already that I knew with some of the food hubs that we'll be talking about later. And so procuring local food for the center was not terribly difficult when I first came because of the contacts and because we are right in the middle of Grand Rapids. We're pretty much surrounded by farmland. So we have a lot of really great resources. And then I've been in the hospitality food place for about over 10 years. Knew I did not want to do a restaurant job, and so this was just kind of the perfect fit where I get to cook, have fun with kids. I've been working with kids for many years too, and not have to work all nights, weekends, and holidays. So it was a perfect fit.
So one of the first things that we had to do was get support to be able to really change our food program. And so the first thing that I did when I was looking to hire a new food service program manager was talk to the executive director and kind of told her all of the reasons why it's really important that we find someone who is better qualified, not just someone who loves cooking. So I had to get support to increase the salary a little bit, and also to change where we purchase. So one of the really key pieces was getting that executive director support. And then also we're a nonprofit organization, so we have a board of directors as well, and I had to get their support. It's not very easy to argue that children need healthy food, so it was easy to get that support, but it's still something that was important. And then we also had to get teacher support because they're the ones that are really serving this food to the children. And if the teachers are turning up their nose at something, to a new vegetable or something, then the kids are really going to follow suit. So we had to make sure that the teachers were on board as well.
Mm-hmm. And then parents too, it was pretty easy for them to get on board. They loved all of the new changes that we were implementing with the menu, and even had a couple parents say like, oh, my kid won't eat this at home because it's not the way Miss Becky makes it, which is like really great support. It makes me feel good in what I do. So and then kids trying new items, it's kind of one of those things you have to introduce slowly, and we'll talk a little bit more about that later. But a lot of kids were actually pretty open to the idea, and we just kind of kept introducing it to them instead of just one time and they don't like it, but we kept introducing it. And they're kids, so the nice thing is they're very honest, and so they will tell you. So you get great feedback with their honesty. So. And then just the pride in our work, I tell people often I wouldn't take this job if I couldn't do what I do, because I don't, just with my background, I don't like to buy processed foods. I don't like to eat them myself. And so if I wasn't able to make things from scratch and to get items locally, then I would be elsewhere. So it's just been really, really great to kind of put all the passions into one.
So here is one of our sample menus, and we're going to spend a little bit of time here because there's a lot of really great information just on this sample menu.
Okay, so this is a menu that I did a couple weeks ago. So you can see the first asterisk is a locally sourced item, and then the second one is scratch made. So just so parents know, you know, what their kids are eating. So the first thing when I came is kind of looking at the menu and where could I implement scratch-made things for items that were typically processed. So one of the things is the sloppy joes. You know, there were a couple cans of Manwich when I came, which is not awful, but with coming from the background that I have, to make a homemade sloppy joe took me no more time than to open the can. And so just taking the tomatoes, I have local tomatoes, and reducing them, adding some spices, and then I, you know, add in, we get a lot, we're great, and we get grass-fed beef here, so just allowing and just letting it simmer. And then a really great resource for local food is a bakery that's right down the street. We have quite a few bakeries, but it seems like even the smallest of towns will have those bakeries that have been around for 50, 60, 70 years, and their prices tend to not rise with everything else. And so, you know, I can get like a dozen slider buns for a couple of dollars, and it's a great portion control too, instead of having this huge bun that the kids, you know, don't like. And so along with the menu, we also really focus on portion control. And so slider buns are great for kids under 5. So that's kind of one thing that we looked. Chicken noodle soup. So a lot of times I don't plan ahead as well as I should. So the chicken I pull out of the freezer the morning of and need to use it, and 5 pounds of chicken does not thaw super fast. So what I do, you know, run the water over it, keeping with guidelines, and then I boil the chicken, which it really tenderizes the chicken for our little mouths, and shred it. But then the water that I boil the chicken in, that is a stock right there. So then I use that stock. So like for Wednesday on the 28th, that chicken noodle soup, I've got my chicken, my stock, you know, onions and carrots, and then you just throw in the noodles. So I don't buy stock. So it significantly reduces the sodium when I make soups, which is, again, great for the kids. And I always tell the staff, I said, I'm sorry, but all the food's undersalted. So it's like, I know it's undersalted, so I'm not offended if you salt it, so go for it. And then, you know, just having our extra veggie on the side. So it's been, I would say for 9:30, the plums, that was kind of a fun new fruit to introduce to the kids. A lot of kids have never seen plums. And we got some great different varieties of plums in. So one time they had a nice, really dark flesh. The next time they had a bright yellow flesh. And so again, it's kind of like the same fruit, but the kids are recognizing that even though, you know, you have a plum, there's different varieties of the plums. Same thing with the carrots. I often will get in rainbow carrots, which they think is a lot of fun. Just word of the wise, the purple carrots do dye food, which I learned when I made some chicken and dumplings last year, and the whole dish was purple, so just be leery of that. The kids thought it was kind of funny. So, but, and then just some other, so we've got 4 lunches that are fairly kid-friendly. The chicken curry was another thing that I wasn't sure how the kids would handle it, but they really loved it. So that's kind of something fun to be introducing. And instead of using just like a long white rice, I'll get basmati rice in, so it's got a little more flavor and a little more texture to it. So again, just offering, you know, a staple that they know, rice, but offering a different variety so that they can just kind of see the different things. And then from suppliers too, from some of the broadline distributors, you know, you can get frozen sliced apples in, which is really great to make your own applesauce. So that's what I do for applesauce. I just take those, you know, I'm not peeling 10 pounds or 20 pounds of apples. I don't really have time for that, but I can get in local IQF apples and just put them in a pot with a little bit of water and boil them down with some spices and then puree them, and we've got like a really great applesauce for the kids that's homemade. And then also switching to the blueberry smoothie, I got in a local yogurt, which tastes very different than other yogurt, and it has a very different texture. So it was really So I kind of had to add some things to the yogurt so that the kids would eat it. So I do smoothies, which they absolutely love smoothies. So again, that's a really great way to bring in local fruits. And to, if you have an item that the kids are a little leery about, you know, again, you kind of have like a new item with an old item, so they're a little more willing to try. So
one of the things that you'll notice is there's a lot of single asterisks on there, allowing us to locally source so much of our products. We used to purchase primarily from a broadline distributor, and some of the relationships we've made have really allowed us to purchase locally. We have a local food hub in Grand Rapids called West Michigan Farm Link, where there are local farmers and growers that have come together and provide local produce and meats, eggs, to organizations, restaurants, and early childhood programs at a reduced rate. So we're getting wholesale prices for local products. So that's really increased the amount of local produce and local foods that we've been able to purchase. And then we also have a Michigan-wide distributor that we just started using that also uses, it's all Michigan products, and they deliver throughout the state. So that's increased the amount of local Michigan products that we've been able to make and use. So there's I don't know that every state has the same opportunities that Michigan does, but just kind of being creative and finding out what food hubs are out there, and then also bakeries and stuff like that that's really helped. Okay, there we go.
All right, so just, we have a center of about 40 to 50 kids on average a day, and then we have about 15 staff, so it's about 60 people or so that we're cooking for. Also, when doing some vegetables, I just started doing different cooking methods, so I roast a lot of vegetables instead of boil them or steam them, so it kind of brings out the natural sugars, kind of caramelizes them. With the kids have really enjoyed that a lot. And then too, with a lot of this fresh made food, I can make the quantities that we need without over making. So there's been a huge reduction in food waste, which is always good because I just hate looking at tubs and tubs of wasted food. So it's really been able to reduce the food waste. So we put into the classrooms what the kids need portion-wise for CACFP guidelines, and then any extra food that we have, I put on a cart in the hallway, so that way the teachers can go out and get more if needed. But if it's not needed, then that food is not tainted, I guess you could say, because it has not been in contact with anybody. So it can be reused, or we'll put it out for staff at a later date. So that's been a great way to reduce some of the food waste that we had.
So as we've kind of switched over to local scratch-made food, we've had some bumps in the road. One of them is staying within the budget, and this has actually been surprising to us. Switching over to mostly local and fresh ingredients, we actually have saved money, which has been really interesting. And a lot of that is just reducing waste, like Becky was saying, and just ordering smarter, ordering things that are in season so that they're at a lower price. Another bump is just new children, new families that have enrolled. Sometimes they are not, sometimes parents can be more concerned with their child just eating enough. And if their child doesn't like something the first, few days, they might say, ask to bring in their own food. And we really just encourage parents to give it some time. A child won't starve themselves. And just kind of give them some time to start enjoying healthier foods. Sometimes it's a little difficult to find local ingredients to diversify our menu. We are really committed to making sure that we provide diversity in our foods. and that's not always easy to find local foods to do that. And also finding diverse sources. We want to make sure that we have diversity in our vendors, and that's difficult to find as well. And the final kind of challenge that we've had is just an initial challenge was, as a director, I knew that I just couldn't hire someone that just enjoyed cooking. I had to increase the pay scale a little bit and the requirements and make sure that I was really finding someone who was passionate about healthy cooking, but also someone who has a degree primarily is trained in restaurant cooking in restaurants, and it's a lot harder to find someone who's passionate about this type of work specifically.
All right, so also I started just a couple of programs when I came. So one was scratch-made baby food. So you can see on the left we have Crew enjoying some spinach, and on the right Jackson has, I think that squash he's eating. So that's been something very helpful to the parents. You know, and all of the baby food that we do, again, is locally sourced. So it's amazing how one butternut squash can make an overabundance of baby food when they're eating 2 ounces a day. So it really is a very minimal time commitment. And we just got some containers, and 2 and 4 ounce containers, and I just portion out and put it in the freezer, and then I just, you know, connect with the teachers that day and see how much food they need. So that's been a really fun program. And then also I started a celebration menu, which is in Michigan, it might be national, I'm not sure. You can't bring in homemade food anymore to celebrate your child's birthday. It has to be purchased, you know, from a store. So instead of that, the parents can order from me cookies or mini cupcakes. So that way their child is getting a scratch-made item, even if it's not made by the parent. So, you know, it's kind of a really great collaboration.
And it's delivered warm to their classroom for afternoon snack.
Yeah,
so
the teachers love it too. So these are just a couple of pictures. It was kind of funny when we were going over this webinar. Lacey asked me to show a picture of my staff, and I kind of laughed. I don't have a staff, it's just me. So there's my selfie making some broccoli mac and cheese for Monday. And then another way over the summer that I saved a little bit of money is we have less attendance in the summer. So I was able to go out and pick about 30 pounds of strawberries myself. And when you pick things, it's a lot cheaper. So that was a really great way to grab a ton of Michigan strawberries. And, you know, it's fun for me. I get to be outside in nature picking food for the center, and then, you know, using some fresh local tomatoes to make a tomato soup. And then the bottom left, it doesn't happen a ton, but quite often I can get a plate that's 100% local. So the potatoes were Michigan, the asparagus is Michigan, the beef was Michigan beef, and the bun was from the bakery down the street, and then the sloppy joe I made with local tomatoes. So that's pretty much like 100% Michigan plate. So that's kind of fun when that comes. And on Fridays we have about half of the students here, so I can kind of make items that are a little more challenging. So those are scratch-made chicken tenders with non-GMO chicken, and then breadcrumbs that I just make and then bake them. So I don't have a fryer or anything, so I just bake them and they turn out quite tasty. And then a huge undertaking I did last year, which I will probably do again this year, is I made a big Thanksgiving meal with turkey and mashed potatoes and gravy and carrots and green bean casserole, biscuits, cranberries, stuffing. It took me like a week and a half, but it was really fun. And so the students got to bring one person of their choice to come eat lunch with them the Tuesday before Thanksgiving. And so that was just a really fun way to highlight what we do at Baxter with our food program. So, and that is it. So thank you.
That's it. Yes.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for these great creative examples of engaging families and integrating local food, and so many great creative ways to make it work in your program. We do have a nice amount of time here for questions, so I will address a few questions immediately. We do have questions about accessing this presentation online. this presentation will be accessible online. You will receive a link to the recording when it's available, and then we'll also post it with our resource database, which is www.farmtoschool.org/resources. We also have a question about food hubs and finding local food hubs in your area. So one resource I would point you towards is the National Farm to School Network website, where you can find links to all of our state leads. So you'll find this great map with access to all of our state leads. So that's an individual at every state who has connections to local foods and is our farm to school contact within that state. And that individual can be a great resource for finding opportunities for local food. And then USDA also has a food hub directory. If you search USDA food hub directory, you can start to find food hubs in your area as well. Do any of the panelists have recommendations for finding food hubs or working with food hubs?
Go for it, Becky.
So I was just going to say, you know, a great resource to tap into to find local food is also restaurants. So if you know any chefs and you're close to some of the restaurants, just ask them, you know, where do you get some of your local food from? Do you use any local food hubs? They will know where to get local food for sure.
Especially the farm to fork or farm to table restaurants.
Mm-hmm. I would also suggest in Michigan, one of the resources that we highlight a lot are our Michigan State University Extension specialists. So every state has a land-grant college and extension educators that are associated with them that kind of serve as local connections to agricultural opportunities. And we work closely with a lot of our extension colleagues, and they're very knowledgeable about more localized resources, both for, you know, food hubs that might be available in regions or for our farmers that might be interested in things like that. So.
Hi, this is Jenny. Also, what Lacey was saying, there's the local food directories. So in addition to food hubs, you can find a local farmers market as well as a CSA program.
Great recommendations. Thank you, panelists. And we do have some specific questions around purchasing. So one question is the micro-purchasing applicable to the National School Lunch Program, or is that specific to the CACFP?
It's, I believe it's for all child nutrition programs, but I would have to check.
Great.
Oh yeah, it's all child nutrition programs.
Great.
So that's the National School Lunch Program and CACFP.
And also in regards to the small purchasing and micro purchasing thresholds, is that amount on a per purchase basis or an annual basis, that dollar amount that's defined?
That's on an annual basis.
Great. So another micro-purchasing question, really testing your knowledge in this area. If an individual or a purchaser, a program only has one source for a specific local produce item, how can they follow micro-purchasing and show that they're spreading their purchases among suppliers? Do they need to document a lack of other local providers, and how do they document that?
I would have to look further into that, but if they could send me that question, that would be great.
Great. I'd be happy to put you in connection with that.
Oh, I'm sorry. They need to document the lack of other providers. I'm sorry.
Okay. Great. So would that just look like potentially emails reaching out, or what does that documentation look like?
Yeah, that would be great, just to maybe send an email as well, or just document and save that in their files. Or even notes of phone calls as well.
Yeah, I know the Michigan State Department of Education has some templates for kind of documenting outreach. So for here, even just kind of writing down a list of the steps you took to try and contact other vendors and why or why not they didn't respond or why it wasn't a good fit has served for a lot of folks.
Right. So it sounds like that documentation piece is really key, even if it's just individual notes, but keeping some kind of records. So a farm to school grant question. When we're talking about school-based CACFP programs, is that specifically referring to CACFP programs housed within K through 12 schools, or are there other CACFP programs that are included in that?
It has to be at a school site, so it's a CACFP program that is at a school.
Great. And we see a lot
Does that make sense?
A lot of growing interest in that.
So yeah, they can definitely apply for the Farm to School grant. It's either the implementation grant or the planning grant. And so they can find more information on the website if they're curious to learn more.
And Jenny, could you share that website with us again?
Let me see here. Sorry, it was on that URL. I think it's here. It's kind of a long web URL, but they can just Google Farm to School and USDA.
Great.
So it's www.fns.usda.gov/farm to school, /farm-school. But I would just suggest Googling Farm to School and USDA.
Great resource. And I do want to mention in reference to that, right now many of you are aware that we are working on the Child Nutrition Reauthorization, and there is a Farm to School Act marker bill within that Child Nutrition Reauthorization. And part of that marker bill would expand access to multiple types of CACFP and early care and education sites and not limit it just to the K through 12 program. So as many of you know, we are waiting on movement for that, but that's something to keep an eye on. And Jenny, do you have a general website for the USDA Farm to School resources?
It's all on the Farm to Preschool webpage, and then on the sidebar you can find all the resources. And it's broken up into Farm to Preschool, Farm to Summer, and regular Farm to School.
Great, thank you. Wow, we've had a lot of great resources coming from this call. So the slides and the recording will be available, so you can certainly look to reference those. And then I also do want to point out that we do have some handouts available in your handout control panel too. Okay. Jenny, I'm wondering if you have any additional information on donated foods. Specifically, I'm wondering if the donated foods applies just to raw product, or if there's any stipulations about donated prepared foods.
I'd have to look into that. What I've mostly seen, we work with the Farm to School lead in Illinois, and she's shared that she's mostly received donated fresh product rather than prepared, but I would have to look more into the details about that. But I know for sure definitely fresh donated food is allowable.
Great. And that may be something that's dependent on local health department regulations as well.
Yes,
so
definitely.
It might be a local issue too. We have a question for the team at Baxter Child Development Center about what kind of grants or funding that you looked for or were able to apply for as you were trying to make these changes.
We didn't have any grants. We just got the support of our executive director, and we were just really careful about just staying within the budget that we already had. So. Mm-hmm. We tried to make changes that wouldn't cost much more. And then when we made changes that would cost more, we tried to do things to reduce cost in other areas. So that's how we really did it a lot. And then probably a year into it, there was a large grant, local grant that Baxter, we're part of a community center, and the community center, it was a grant that we got for the whole community center, and our food program was just a portion of that grant. So one way is just kind of looking, for ways that if you're part of a larger organization, how can you add it into other grants? And then we haven't really looked for a whole lot of grants otherwise. Mm-hmm. So this can be done without spending a lot of extra money or having extra resources.
Yeah, and I know too for my kitchen, I keep my inventory very, very low. So pretty much when I get an order in, I pretty much have nothing in the kitchen. So that's another way I try to really watch my spending, is that I do not keep a large inventory.
That's great to hear how you've been able to really manage that budget and manage that inventory and make some of those changes at minimal cost. I think that's probably one of the biggest challenges or anticipated challenges for program interested in purchasing local. So I really appreciate those kind of insider tips on how you've been able to budget and balance that. Do any of the other panelists have input on any ways to maybe make this financially viable, or on the other hand, opportunities for financial support to expand local purchasing?
Hi, this is Jenny. So I highly recommend really looking into the Farm to School grant, especially since we've expanded to also include early child care settings. So I highly recommend also contacting your Farm to School lead in your region, and you can find that person's contact on our Farm to School webpage just to see what's the best way to apply and ways to really see if there are other grant opportunities as well.
Yeah, and I would just add that from my experience, I think the easiest ways to make things cost effective is to really have a good understanding of seasonality and taking advantage of when products are really available in bulk and farmers are trying to get rid of them. And then also being sure to have conversations ahead of time, so that I find that, at least in Michigan, some of the folks we've talked with, that when farmers know there's an expected income, if they know you're going to buy quantity and that it's going to be, certain, they're often willing to accommodate on price a little bit to make it work with your schedule or with your budget. So I think a lot of it just comes from conversations and acknowledging kind of where your limitations are, while also acknowledging that farmers are trying to make a living as well and aren't necessarily reaping huge profits. I think, like Becky and Star highlighted, some of the cost savings can be in that kind of lower waste and making more things from scratch, and having really solid long-term partnerships.
Those are great recommendations, and I know it's really valuable for programs to try to identify those ways to implement these, knowing that they will be able to make their costs work for them. And I also recommend folks might be interested in getting on the National Farm to School Network mailing list. We do often send out resources that can help support those changes based in local procurement and financial stability related to that, as well as resources around funding opportunities and grant opportunities. And you can sign up again for that at farmtoschool.org. We have a question about conferences related to farm to early care and education that representatives and stakeholders can attend. And I'll mention that many of us, including myself and Abby, do present at a wide number of early care and education conferences. So including National Head Start Association, National CACFP Sponsors Association. So we do try to have a presence at many of those national early care and education conferences. And we also have a lot of regional and state partners who are hosting conferences at farm to school conferences at the regional and state level, and many of those highlight and feature farm to early care and education. So again, we share and post a lot of those through our communications and our newsletters from the Farm to School, National Farm to School Network. Any other recommendations from our panel on conferences?
I would just say the National Farm to School Conference, that's every 2 years. I went for the first time this past year, and start saving your money, because it was probably one of the best conferences I've ever been to, and really got me even more excited about this work. And sometimes you kind of feel like you're doing it alone, you know. But there was just so many amazing resources, and it's actually how I met Abby and started collaborating. So I would start saving because that was a good one.
That's great, Becky. Thank you. And again, we did hold that this year in 2016. So the next potential conference would be 2018. And of course, all that information will be shared via Farm to School communications and website. So again, sign up for those and you can stay in tune with that. We have a question about being classified as a farm-to-school agency. And one thing I do want to emphasize is that the national level, this isn't necessarily a program to sign up for, but it's really all of these small steps that you can take to help integrate all of these great activities and benefits. So there's not necessarily a classification or a label, but many opportunities to integrate these benefits. So I know that we are right at time, and I want to thank all of our fantastic panelists for all their great resources and information. When you close out of this webinar, there will be a very brief 5-question multiple choice poll. We'd love to hear what you thought and what you'd like to learn more about in the next Farm to Early Care and Education webinars. And please feel free to take our pledge. Don't forget, this is National Farm to School Month, and we want to hear about how you're celebrating. So you can take that pledge at farmtoschool.org/one small step. And we look forward to hearing about all of your farm to school successes. So many thanks again for all the attendees and the panelists, and we look forward to continuing to support your efforts in bringing great food to our littlest eaters.